Okay. So yesterday we have seen the concept of flex queues, and now the next concept what we are going to start today is like future methods. Okay. So one second, please. Okay. Future method, basically, what does it means by a future method, and what is the purpose of this? Let's understand this. Okay. See, first of all, whenever we are going to start with this concept, we must understand one thing. What is the purpose of future method in case of asynchronous programming? So, there are two different kinds of objects. There are two different types of objects rather. First one is called as setup and the non-setup. Okay. Objects are, I mean, internally the objects are divided into two different types. First type is setup object. The second type is non-setup object. These are the two different types of setup object and non-setup. Spelling is wrong. Yes, setup and a non-setup object. Okay, so these are the two different types of objects. Now let's first of all understand what does it means by setup and what does it means by non-setup. Okay, setup are all those objects that directly interacts with the metadata, Salesforce metadata. All of those kinds of objects, so all those kinds of objects that directly interact with Salesforce metadata, they are called as what? They are called as setup objects. So let me give you some of the examples. What does it mean by a setup object? And if you wanted to understand what is a metadata, so there are so many times I have told you this. Okay, when we design a class, when we write down a code, there is one of the class which is actually working behind this. There's a code behind code what you are writing, whatever the classes what you have created onto developer console. So many classes we have created, right? And like if I write down system dot, so we used to get this intelligence over here. So I always used to say this, okay, this is the front end line code, but there is a code which is actually learning, which is the code, there is a code which is actually being implemented behind this also. Now where exactly, if I write down, if I write down this class database dot, okay, then these on database is a class, and then these are the methods of this class, right? These are the methods of this class. If I write down, like, if I write down, for example, math dot, math dot, then math is a class, and these are the methods of that class. So where this class has been written, math, where this class database class is being written. If you try to find it over here, if you go with this open, and if you try to class it, and if you type it over here something like math, you know we don't find math operation helper is something what we have designed, like it's a customer class, but there is no such class with the name called as math. If you go with, like, system.debug, if you try to type over here system, and if you try to find this class over here, you will not going to find anything. So this exactly means there is a class, there is a code which is actually running behind this code, and that particular things whatever we are, those particular thing whatever we are accessing from that particular database, that database itself is named metadata. Common definition what for metadata, what we have learned in the engineering is, it's a data about data. If someone of you is from CSE background, if you have learned this terminology, so we used to describe metadata as, like, what is the definition? It is data about data. It's a data about data. So whatever the classes, whatever the functions, and whatever the procedures, whatever the method that we are using in writing an Apex program, all of those coming from one of the database, and that database is called as metadata. Okay, then see. So this is something which is actually, we used to call this as an internal database, and this is not accessible directly. Now there are few of the objects that Salesforce has given rights that those objects could directly interact with the metadata. So all those kinds of objects that could directly interact with metadata, they are called as setup objects. Now probably you have understood the concept. Okay, all those, first of all, before we actually, to make this definition clear, we should know what exactly is metadata. Like if they ask you this in the interview, what do you mean by a setup object, and you give that this definition, the objects, those kinds of objects that directly interact with Salesforce metadata, they are called as what? They are called as setup objects. Now, if they ask you what does it mean by metadata, then what? So if we are learning this, we should learn every terminology over here. That's the reason I have explained you what does it means by a metadata. So metadata is something, that everything whatever we are fetching inside the code, whatever you are fetching inside a code, this definition, if you remember, I told you this collections, list, set, and map, these are internally classes. These are internally classes. Let me try to go with that point. Let me try to go on that particular point. That time also I told you one thing, that these collections, collections, list, set, map, although we are using it, but internally, these also are the classes, and that's the reason they are having the methods. Methods are actually for what? Methods are actually for the classes, right? So I have written that point also. Let me try to find it out, uh, collections, here we have written here. Hmm. Apex provide following three below three collection. What collection itself is a class. You call this as a list collection, internally it is a class. You call it as a set collection, internally it's a class. Map is a class. Map is a collection. We for us. I mean, if you see it from the top, we used to call this, say as a simplicity, for the sake of simplicity, we used to call it as collection. Internally, this is also a class. Every collection is a class. But where is this class? Where is this class? If it's a class, it must be present somewhere. And if you try to find it over here, you're not going to find anything called as list. You are not going to find anything called as set. If we are saying this ki yaar ye classes and all these are the classes, your system is a class, your database is a class, you know, there are so many internal classes. Then where all these classes present? ये सारी classes हैं कहाँ पे यार actually? Where all these classes are present? है ना? तो दैट पर्टिकुलर डेटाबेस देखो, जहां पे हम हिट नहीं कर सकते डायरेक्टली, ट्राई टू अंडरस्टैंड दिस कंसेप्ट, तब तक मैं स्क्रॉल भी कर लेता हूँ। तो जहां पे अपन डायरेक्टली हिट नहीं कर सकते, बट वी कुड एक्सेस देम, है ना? दैट काइंड ऑफ डेटाबेस इज समथिंग कॉल्ड एज मेटा डेटा ऑफ सेल्सफोर्स. So it's basically data about data. Metadata, this word is actually data about data. It's a class for a class. It's a method for a method. That is where, and every definition what you use, whatever you use inside the program, the definition is there inside metadata. The definition inside is there metadata. And then we have used that for this, like your bash programming. Bash programming must implement one database. What is that? What's that? Every bash program, if you wanted to make this as a bash program, it must implement one thing. What is that? Database or batchable. Again, database is a class, batchable is the interface. If I wanted to get this facility of like I mean, I wanted to transfer the result of one batch to another batch, then I'll go with the stateful interface, where this stateful interface is written for the database class. Now where this database class itself is present, because nowhere if we try to find it out, we cannot find it. Because we don't have direct access to the metadata. But this is somewhere present, right? Where, what is that place is to be called? That place is called as metadata. Now probably I think every one of you is absolutely clear what exactly it means by the Salesforce metadata. Now let's come to the topic. So there are two kinds of objects, There are only few of the objects are there that could directly interact with Salesforce metadata. Only few. There are only few objects are there that have this functionality, that have this speciality, that they could directly interact with the metadata, Salesforce metadata. And those kinds of objects are called as what? Setup objects. Those kinds of objects, actually they are called as setup objects. Let's see who some of them, like user. User is one of the objects. 00U, that's what the code of user. And then profile. We have learned that, we set up the profiles, somewhere I have told you this, and probably I don't remember whether you know this or not. When we were learning this, there was a diagram. Profile overview. Yes, see this diagram, right? See this diagram. Okay. Now I told you one thing, that all of the things related to what? Related to license, they are present inside one of the object, user license object. All of the things related to profile, they are present inside one of the objects. Salesforce have these three standard objects. Every the details of every licenses and everything, they are present inside an object, user license object. The details of profiles and everything, they are present inside one of the object, profile. and the details of the user what you created, and the custom everything, custom profile, standard profile, custom user, standard user, licenses. There is no concept of custom. Licenses are always standard, but all the things they are present inside Salesforce. Everything inside Salesforce is present inside one of the object. There are few of the objects. There are few of the objects that could directly interact with metadata. Profile is them, user license is them, user itself is them. So these are what, these are the examples of, these are the examples of uh, setup objects. User license is a setup object, your profile is a setup object, user is also a setup object, and then there are so many others also. Say business to process, this is what setup object. Custom field, custom object. Custom object is an object for the custom object. Custom field is an object for the custom field. What does it mean? See, whatever the object you created the objects like hiring manager, position, candidate, and you used to call them as a custom object. Do you know whatever the objects you created, they are itself map inside one of the object, custom object. And then custom fields, whatever the fields you have been created, probably in the standard object and the custom object, they are there into this object. Custom tab, whatever the tab you created tabs for the object like position and hiring manager and the candidates. There also there's an object to store the details of the tab, whatever we created. How we created? By using this setup build create. What I wanted to create, I wanted to create a tab. How many different types of tab? There are 5 different types of tabs. There are 5 different types of tab. Custom object tab, web page tab, lightning page tab, visual force page tab, and lightning component tab. All of the tabs whatever you have created, these tabs, custom object tab, where they are going to be get stored, they will be stored inside a standard object called as custom tab. Document 015 that you already have used. Every static resource whatever you wanted to store inside the Salesforce, they are first uploaded inside document object, and from document object we need to use them. Then groups, public groups you already created. Field sets, record type. I will be covering this, I will be covering this from the batch 202 probably, there I'll be covering your record type. So every such kind of thing, your validation rule, workflow rules, whatever you created, they are also they are being stored inside one object called as validation rule object, workflow rule object. So these are few of the examples of those objects that could directly interact with the Salesforce metadata, and these kinds of objects are called as setup object. Now apart from this, whatever you have used so far, remaining every standard and a custom object, whatever you have used so far, every come under the category of non-setup object. ठीक है, तो हमने आज तक जितने भी ऑब्जेक्ट्स यूज किए, इट कुड बी सम ऑफ द स्टैंडर्ड या फिर कुछ कस्टम ऑब्जेक्ट, जो कुछ भी, एवरी ऑब्जेक्ट अपार्ट फ्रॉम दीज ऑब्जेक्ट, एवरी ऑब्जेक्ट इज व्हाट, नॉन सेटअप ऑब्जेक्ट. ठीक है, तो देर आर टू काइंड्स ऑफ ऑब्जेक्ट, सेटअप एंड दी नॉन सेटअप. आई होप दिस डेफिनेशन टू इज क्लियर टू एवरी वन ऑफ यू. What do you mean by setup, and then what is a non-setup? Okay, now what we are learning about something called as future method. And what is the purpose of future method? That is described. So I'm taking you forward towards that. Step by step we are going. We first have understood one of the concept, how many different types of, rather, what is setup object and non-setup object. That is what we have learned. Now see, here I wanted to, every one of you to, if someone asks you this in the interview, listen this very carefully, because some of you are giving interviews these days. So if someone asks you this in the interview, how many different types of objects? What are the types of objects? So you see, you can answer this in 2 ways. Now, because you know this, you can answer it in 2 different ways. You can tell them actually there are 2 different categorizations. First is standard and the custom object. Then there's one more categorization, setup and non-setup object. So immediately if you say this, setup and non-setup, this actually describes to the interviewer that, yeah, this is somebody who is having the knowledge, a deep knowledge, not just thorough knowledge. Is someone who is having a deep conceptual knowledge. That's the reason I'm telling you. Now onward, if somebody asks you in the interview how many different types of objects are there, so you can, probably give 2 different answers for this. There are 2 different categorizations, standard and custom. And you know this, what is standard, what is custom. And then setup and non-setup objects. So there are 2 different categorizations for that. And prescribe both of them. Describe them. What is setup, non-setup, what is standard, custom, everything. ठीक है, चलो आगे बढ़ते हैं. Now let's come to the topic future method. future method. Okay, so whenever we wanted, if for example, if we are writing a program, and then we are using both setup and non-setup object in the same program. So in a single transaction, in a single program, if I'm using both setup and non-setup, if I'm using both setup and non-setup object, then Salesforce won't allow me to use this. That means these two objects cannot be simultaneously used. These two objects cannot be used simultaneously in a single program, in a single transaction. And you know what kind of error it's going to give you? Mixed DML operation. Mixed DML operation. This is what the error you are going to get. This is what the error you are going to get. Mixed DML operation. And they will ask you this in the interview also. When you see this, have you ever encountered this exception? Mixed DML operation exception. Have you ever seen this? You need to say yes. Although I haven't seen, but I know. I haven't seen this because I know when it's generated. So obviously, I avoided those circumstances that generates this exception. So I know when this generate and when this exception is generated, and then what needs to be done. What we can do to avoid, what we can do that avoids this particular exception to be get generated. So they will ask you this. So whenever in a same program, if you combine the operations on setup and a non-setup, so Salesforce won't allow you to perform that operation. It's going to throw you one error. Whenever the user tries to perform the DML operation, DMLs means what? Insert, update, delete, merge, whatever, any kind of operation on both what? Setup and non-setup object within a single transaction, within the same transaction, not single, within the same transaction. So that time, Salesforce will raise an exception. Salesforce will raise an exception. Salesforce won't allow you to perform that DML. Rather, it will give you an error. It will give you an exception, mixed DML operation. So how we could handle that we are going to discuss. How we could handle. See, so now I'm going to cover that also, but okay, I'll come back over here. And let's do this use case and let's see the problem, and then we will see how we could handle the problem. So we will create a future method. Rather than I'll create a simple program. First of all, I'll create a simple program, and then where I will be trying to insert a record inside the hiring manager. At the same time, in the same program, I will be trying to deactivate a user. We certainly have different users over. We have created so many users. Uh, like there's a customer user, he's in active state. One way is to deactivate is, you by using non-coding, you could make this editing, you could deactivate it. This is one of you uncheck and save it, he's going to become deactivated. And you know what happens after deactivating a user? Can anyone tell me this? What happens when I deactivate a user? Yes, can anyone tell me? I mean, okay, I have muted. Once again, I'm giving you this command. Yes. Okay, what I'm doing, allow participants to unmute. Yeah, now you have this command. Tell me what happens when we deactivate a user.
License become available for further use.
Exactly, the license becomes available and we can reuse the license, right? We can reuse the license. Exactly. Okay, so I will be deactivating one of the user and I'll be inserting a record. That means, see, hiring manager, this is a non-setup object, whereas my user is a setup object. In a single program, I'm trying to make some operation on non-setup. I'm trying to make some operation on the setup object. In a single transaction, I am attempting to perform something on the user and hiring manager. I'm performing something on setup object and I'm performing something. I'm trying to do something. Any DML operation, I'm trying to do it into what? Non-setup. So here I am expecting that system will rather stop me by throwing this error onto my face, makes DML operation. Now let's see what happens. Okay, let's see what happens. So let me go in the Salesforce and already have opened this. Let me try to create a class over here. What is the name of class? Common helper. Okay, so let me try to create a class for this. Common helper class. Okay. So I'm creating a class over here and see, first of all, I intentionally will generating that error. मैं error generate करता हूँ, उसके बाद में फिर हम we will see कि how to avoid that error. So I created a class. Now let me create the methods for this. Okay, let me try to create the methods for this. So I'll be creating like public static void. Okay, this is the usual definition what we have done so far. So the method name is, for example, do dml operations. Do dml operations. With this name, you could give any name. Try to give the significant name. That's what I think. Do dml operation. Okay. So what I will be doing over here, for this code will attempt an operation on setup object. So here I will be attempting to do something on the setup object. ठीक है, what we wish to do, I wanted to deactivate a user. एक user को मेरे को deactivate करना है. Setup object is what? User object. ठीक है, so for this I'm actually declaring one variable of the type user with the name user to deactivate. ठीक है, ये वेरिएबल का नाम दिया मैंने. इसका टाइप क्या है? यूजर. बिकॉज आई एम जस्ट सिलेक्टिंग वन यूजर, दैट्स द रीजन मैंने सिर्फ लिस्ट कलेक्शन नहीं लिया है, एक वेरिएबल डिफाइन किया, बिकॉज मैं एक ही यूजर लेने वाला हूं. ठीक है, तो मैं क्वेरी डिजाइन करता हूँ यहाँ पे, उसके लिए मुझे यूजर ऑब्जेक्ट की फील्ड्स पता होना चाहिए. ठीक है, तो वैसे तो आप यूजर ऑब्जेक्ट यहाँ से सर्च कर सकते हो, कोई बड़ी चीज नहीं, यूजर ऑब्जेक्ट आ जाता है. ठीक है, सो नाउ लेट मी डिजाइन दैट क्वेरी. सिलेक्ट आईडी. ठीक है, एंड देन नेम नहीं होता है वहां पे, इट्स एक्चुअली यूजर नेम. नेम फील्ड का नाम जो है ना, वहां पे यूजर नेम होता है, और एक होता है इज एक्टिव फील्ड होती है. इज एक्टिव फ्रॉम वेयर? फ्रॉम यूजर. आई वांटेड टू सिलेक्ट दिस बट नॉट एवरी रिकॉर्ड, फ्रॉम यूजर. वेयर यूजर नेम equals to let me give the username, because username is a string. Because username is a string, I'm actually encoding it inside single inverted comma. So for the customer user, see, this is full name, this is not username is over here. For the customer user, this is the name. So let me open this user and try to copy this username. This is the username. So I'm copying this and I'm pasting it over here. Okay. And then one more thing, actually it will going to give me, for sure it will going to give me one record only, but I don't want it to take the chance, and so I'm limiting it to one, because we have defined one variable and the capacity of one variable is to store one record only. And that's the reason I am, whenever you define a variable of any S object means Salesforce object, whenever you define a variable, as a best practice you should use limit clause. See, it वैसे तो होता ही नहीं, दिस इज नॉट अ चांस. आई एम जस्ट टू मेक यू अवेयर ऑफ दिस बेस्ट प्रैक्टिसेस. आई एम एक्चुअली यूजिंग वेयर क्लॉज. वैसे आप ये जानते हो कि एक यूजर नेम जो है, यूजर नेम इज नेवर डुप्लीकेटेड इन सेल्सफोर्स. तो ये रिडंडेंट है, ये सबको दिस इज रिडंडेंट. और ये अगर आप लिखोगे तो शायद क्वेश्चनेबल है कि इफ यू नो कि सेल्सफोर्स में कभी भी एक नाम से दो लोग नहीं हो सकते. तो अगर आप इसके विदाउट में भी क्वेरी फायर करते हो ना, तो ऑलवेज यू आर गोइंग टू गेट वन रिजल्ट, बिकॉज एक यूजर नेम्स इज समथिंग विच इज यूनिक. ईमेल आईडी कितना भी चलता है डुप्लीकेटेड, यूजर नेम डुप्लीकेटेड नहीं चलता है. और ये हमने तब पढ़ा था कि व्हेन वी आर लर्निंग लाइक हाउ टू क्रिएट द यूजर्स, दैट टाइम आई टोल्ड यू यूजर नेम्स आर यूनिक, नॉट अक्रॉस जस्ट योर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, नॉट जस्ट अक्रॉस योर सर्वर. इट्स एक्चुअली यूनिक अमंग whole Salesforce instance, the complete Salesforce ecosystem, every server. This is something which is unique. So if without limit clause, if you even fire the query, we are absolutely sure that this query will return me only one record of the type this user. बट क्या है, एक बेस्ट प्रैक्टिस के लिए आपको मैं समझा रहा हूँ. सी, प्रोग्रामिंग के अपने कुछ बेस्ट प्रैक्टिसेस होती हैं, कुछ रूल्स, एंड आई वांटेड यू टू गेट अवेयर ऑफ दोस थिंग्स. दैट्स द रीजन आई एम टेलिंग यू कि किसी भी एस ऑब्जेक्ट को जब आप वेरिएबल से डिक्लेयर करते हो ना, तो एज अ बेस्ट प्रैक्टिस एक आदत डाल लो लिमिट इक्वल्स टू वन देने की, सो दैट इट विल गिव यू ओनली वन रिकॉर्ड एंड यू कुड डेफिनेटली स्टोर वन रिकॉर्ड इनसाइड अ वेरिएबल. बस ये बेस्ट प्रैक्टिस के लिए मैं आपको बोल रहा हूँ. यहाँ क्योंकि मैं यूजर ऑब्जेक्ट पे काम कर रहा हूँ, यहाँ जरूरत ही नहीं है मुझको, है ना. समझ लो, सारी चीजें समझ लो. तो ये एक थोड़ा सा रिडंडेंसी है यहाँ पे, लेकिन मैं चाहता हूँ कि आप समझो, अगर मैं हटा दूंगा इसको तो शायद आपको ये बात कभी पता ही नहीं चले कि ये कुछ रूल्स होते हैं। जब भी हम कोई भी ऐसा ऑब्जेक्ट लूँ, अगर मैं, अच्छा फर्ज करो मैं अगर ऐसा ना देते हुए इफ आई वाज डिफाइनिंग इट लाइक दिस अकाउंट, वेयर फ्रॉम अकाउंट अगर मैं लिखता, फ्रॉम अकाउंट, एंड लेट्स से द अकाउंट नेम इज लाइक, अकाउंट नेम इज मर्क, तो हो सकता है मर्क नाम से दो अकाउंट होते, तब क्या करते आप, तब क्या करते बताओ, तब तो आपको लिमिट वन देना ही पड़ता ना। वेयर का अगर मैं कॉन्टेक्ट देता, कॉन्टेक्ट नेम कपिल, कॉन्टेक्ट लास्ट नेम इज शर्मा, तो probably with the last name Sharma we could have more than 3 to 4 record, तब क्या करते आप, this query in that case is going to return so many different kinds of record, इस तब आपको लिमिट वन देना ही पड़ता था, इसीलिए अभी उसकी जरूरत नहीं थी, पता है क्या, लेकिन फिर भी मैं चाहता था कि एक बेस्ट प्रैक्टिस है आपको समझानी थी, इसलिए मैंने लिमिट यहाँ पे रखा। चलो आगे बढ़ते हैं। सो दिस क्वेरी विल रिटर्न मी वन रिकॉर्ड, दिस क्वेरी विल रिटर्न मी वन रिकॉर्ड ऑफ द टाइप यूजर, दिस क्वेरी विल रिटर्न मी वन रिकॉर्ड ऑफ द टाइप यूजर, व्हाट इज द एरर, ओके हट गया, ठीक है। So let me save up to this, ठीक है। Now what I wanted to do, I wanted to deactivate this user, ये जो यूजर है हमारा स्काईलाइन कस्टमर, उसको मुझे डीएक्टिवेट करना है, ये कहाँ पर प्रेजेंट है, यहाँ पर है, ठीक है, यहाँ पर है। So I wanted to deactivate this user, तो as a best practices I will be seeing that whether this thing is, I mean this user, this variable contains the record or not, this variable contains the record or not, and see how I will be checking this. So if user to deactivate dot id, because we have asked for the id also, right, we have asked for the id, if user to deactivate dot id is not equals to null, if it is not equals to null, if it is not equals to null, अगर id null नहीं है इसका मतलब id है, और अगर id है मतलब ये रिकॉर्ड है, ये यूजर है। if this user, if with this name if there is no user there will be no id, in that case the id will be null, and if this name there is a user, then it's what it will going to return the id of that user। तो यहाँ पे मैं क्या चेक कर रहा हूँ कि यूजर टू डीएक्टिवेट, मतलब ये जो पर्टिकुलर यूजर है उसका आईडी इज नॉट इक्वल टू नल, यानी वो यूजर है, विद दिस नेम देयर इज अ यूजर, यूजर है तभी तो आईडी है उसकी, है ना, तो दैट इज व्हाट आई एम चेकिंग। तो अगर हमको पता चल जाता है कि वो है, तो हमें क्या करना है, उसकी इज एक्टिव फील्ड्स को फॉल्स कर देना, बस और कुछ नहीं। इज एक्टिव आपने देखा, अभी यहाँ बताया मैंने आपको, इज एक्टिव जो है, इज एक्टिव यानी ये वाली फील्ड का नाम, ये अभी ट्रू है, ये इसकी वैल्यू अभी ट्रू है, राइट, उसको फॉल्स कर देना। तो व्हाट आई एम गोइंग टू डू ओवर हियर, यूजर टू डीएक्टिवेट, देखो यूजर टू डीएक्टिवेट डॉट सी, ये सारी फील्ड्स है यूजर ऑब्जेक्ट की, ये सारी फील्ड्स है यूजर ऑब्जेक्ट, देखो इज एक्टिवेशन से ये सारी फील्ड्स हैं यूजर ऑब्जेक्ट की, ये सारी फील्ड्स आ रही हैं, राइट। आई वांटेड टू टेक इज एक्टिव, ठीक है, इट्स अ बूलियन इक्वल्स टू व्हाट, आई एम मेकिंग इट फॉल्स, false, आई एम मेकिंग इट फॉल्स, ठीक है, आई एम मेकिंग इट फॉल्स, एंड देन एंड तो अब ये वापस अपडेट होना चाहिए, इसलिए आई एम मेकिंग द यूज ऑफ डीएमएल स्टेटमेंट। यहाँ पे मैं डीएमएल स्टेटमेंट देता हूँ, अपडेट व्हाट, अपडेट यूजर टू डीएक्टिव, अपडेट यूजर टू डीएक्टिव, ठीक है, ये हो गया, दिस इज माय फर्स्ट मेथड, ठीक है, दिस इज माय फर्स्ट मेथड, ठीक है। let this error to be get removed, उसके बाद में फिर मैं इसको, this is my first method, now error is removed, I'm saving this, okay, this is my first method, this is my first method। now I'm creating one more method, ठीक है, I'm creating one more method, I'm creating one more method within the same class, this is the scope of my class, within the same class I'm creating one more method, ठीक है, one more method। So let me copy paste it over here, yes। Now here what I am attempting, I am attempting this code, this code will attempt an operation on a non-setup operation, a non-setup object, ठीक है। यहाँ पे जो मैं कोडिंग करने वाला हूँ that will be attempting an operation on the non-setup object, तो non-setup object के लिए public static void, ठीक है, या फिर ऐसा करता हूँ मैं इसको पहले उसको यहाँ नहीं लिखता, इसी में अंदर लेता हूँ, एक ही मेथड के अंदर लेता हूँ, चलो एक ही मेथड के अंदर ले लेता हूँ, दैट आई कैन डू, ठीक है, एक ही मेथड के अंदर लेता हूँ, फिर दूसरी मेथड बनाता हूँ, चलो। सो दूसरा क्या करना है हमको, वी वांटेड टू इंसर्ट हायरिंग मैनेजर रिकॉर्ड, हायरिंग मैनेजर में एक रिकॉर्ड इंसर्ट करना है, तो हायरिंग मैनेजर में रिकॉर्ड इंसर्ट करना है, तो हायरिंग मैनेजर ऑब्जेक्ट, हायरिंग मैनेजर का एक ऑब्जेक्ट क्रिएट करो, तो हायरिंग मैनेजर का नाम क्या है, हायरिंग मैनेजर का एपीआई नेम क्या है, हायरिंग मैनेजर का एपीआई नेम है ये, इसको मैं कॉपी करता हूँ और इसी के अंदर ना, इसी के अंदर आई विल बी क्रिएटिंग लाइक एक ऑब्जेक्ट, एक इंस्टेंस क्रिएट करता हूँ हायरिंग मैनेजर का, हायरिंग मैनेजर का एक इंस्टेंस, जैसे कि HR रिकॉर्ड इक्वल्स टू HR रिकॉर्ड इक्वल्स टू न्यू कीवर्ड के साथ इसको डिफॉल्ट कंस्ट्रक्टर बना देता हूँ. नाउ व्हाट वी हैव डन, वी क्रिएटेड अ मेथड, we created a method, right? We created an instance, we not method, we created an instance of hiring manager. Now with this instance, let me copy this. I will be creating hiring manager record. Hiring manager का एक record मैं इस instance से बनाता हूँ. So HR record dot HR record dot, ठीक है. What are the things that are mandatory? The first one is name, ठीक है. Name equals to for example, do we have anything with the name S? I have so many records. M Manish. Okay, there's nothing with the N. Okay, there's nothing with the N. So I'm giving the name as to be what? Neeraj Tripathi. Okay, HR.name. Because I've seen that there's nothing with the N over here. Let's now go with this. So HR record dot. The second is what? The second is probably HR email ID. So I'm taking this email ID. It's like neeraj@test.com. Okay, and then HR record dot ID, HR ID is deleted, last modified. Location, I'm taking this. So location equals to something from the pick list itself. You know, it not if try with some another input that is not there in the pick list, it will going to throw you this error. So HR record dot name, I have taken location also. Position count is this is a roll up summary. बस that much इतना ही है. Contact number, हाँ contact number. So contact number equals to let me give my contact number for this 9923188052, and then we have anything more, location, contact number, email ID. I think that much is done. Okay, so I created this record, one record, and I wanted to get insert, so I'm using a DML statement insert. What I wanted to insert, I wanted to insert this, so I'm inserting this. Okay, I completed the program. Do we have any error so far? No. Let me try to save this. So there is no error in the program. The program, see, there's no error. The program compiled successfully. When this program has been presented to the Apex compiler couldn't find any mistake in this. All the syntax, all the semantics, all of the keywords, everything, whatever is required, they are there in the proper format. There is no mistake. There is no syntax mistake, although there is syntactical mistake, and that syntactical mistake we will be going to find when we will be executing this program. Okay, so how we are executing, we have made this method as a static void. So I'm going to do this like common helper dot and the name of the method do DML. Let me call this execute. See, now this is something which is very, very important. This is something which is very important. See this, we got this error, we got this error. And what it has been written, what is written over here? Mixed DML operation. See the error. Why you have this system DML exception insert first insertion has been failed because there is an error mixed DML operation. Okay, because you were attempting something on setup and non-setup. You were attempting something on setup object, at the same time you are attempting something update operation on the non-setup, or could be vice versa. So these are the reasons, these are the reasons These are the reasons why actually the error, why this operation has been failed, because you were attempting something, you were attempting something over here. You were attempting something over here. That's the reason this operation has been failed. You were attempting something over here. That's the reason this operation has been failed, right? So this is what, this is what mixed DML operation. This is what mixed DML operation. Whenever you are attempting to perform some kind of DML operation on setup object as well as the non-setup object, or vice versa. It could be like, first is setup, second is non-setup. Could be first is non-setup, second is setup. Then you are going to get this error, mixed DML operation. And this is very, very important point, guys. Always remember. This is very important point. This is very important point. So, okay, we are going to, how we are going to attempt this. That's a different story. I'll be taking that. Don't worry. But before that, so what I have done in the same method, in the same method, I have actually, I'm actually trying to perform the operations on the user as well as on the hiring manager. Let me try this with like this, let me try it in another way. The second method. This initially I was trying with this. Now let me do the same thing. So what I will be planning, this code will attempt to do any operation on what? On the non-setup operation. Okay? On the non-setup. So I'm creating one more method for this. Let me create one more method. Public static void. Okay? And the name of the method, for example, create, create, create HR record, create HR record. With this name, I am creating one more method. Okay? I'll be creating one more method. And this whole code, I'm just यहाँ से cut करते हैं and I'm pasting it over here. ठीक है? And what I will be doing over here is like, I will be calling this method once after this execution has been done. Once you have updated this setup object, I'll be calling it over here. Okay? I'll be calling it over here. That means once you have done with the execution of this particular code, after whatever you wanted to perform on the user object, let's call a method, another method. Now here actually I have differentiated. Save kar raha usko. Here actually I have made two separate methods for this. Although it's a cascading, in the cascading, I mean this method you are actually calling it in another method. The method name is do DML operation. Inside do DML operation, I am calling one more method, and this is something called as cascading, nesting of methods. It can be done. That is not the issue. But yes, I have created two different methods for this. One method is performing your operation on the setup object. The second method is attempting to perform the operation on the non-setup. And let's see what happened with this case. चलो ये ऐसा करेंगे तो क्या होगा? चलो same error. You even cannot do it like this. So how we are going to handle this situation? How will you combine the DML operations on the setup and the non-setup in a single transaction? How we can make this to be get happen? How we can make one operation to be get happen? That is what the purpose of future method. Now let's come to the topic, future method. See future method. Let's understand the rule. The future methods are always prefixed with this annotation @future. I mean, if I wanted any of the method to become a future method, I should declare it like this. So what I'm doing, any method, either this method, either this. You could make any method. As the future method. So I will be copying and pasting it over here. Just that's it. @future annotation. So this will make this method as a future method. This will make this method. It will make this method as a future method. Okay, I'm saving this code. Okay, so whenever you wanted to make any method, it's all about method. It's not about the class. अगर एक class level पे होता तो मैं यहाँ पे लिख रहा होता था उसको. यहाँ पे. We cannot make a class. We cannot make a complete class as a future. Future is what? Method. Future method. Future method. Methods are what? They are the members of the classes. The future method. You are required to make the method as a future. There are two methods over here. Do DML operation is one method. Create HR. You can decide. That's not the thing कि आप हमेशा नॉन सेटअप ऑब्जेक्ट को बनाओ. ऐसा कुछ नहीं है. It's up to you यार. आपकी दो में से किसी एक को फ्यूचर कर दो बस. ठीक है. future method does always be defined with the static keyword. So this method, if you are defining this method as a future method, this method must always be static method. So there are few rules. Future method doesn't returns anything, and so the return type is always void. वैसे भी static है, साथ में हमने क्या दे रखा है, void दे रखा है यहाँ पे, because this is something called as procedure. Procedure has nothing a return type, and so it's static and it's void also. उसके बाद में we can supply the parameters, ये बाद में देखेंगे अपन. We can supply the parameters, and one future method can also invoke the another future method. ठीक है, one future method cannot invoke another. That means chaining is not possible. These are some of the governor limits actually, and it doesn't provide any tracking mechanism. तो ये actually these are few of the drawbacks. अभी इसके बाद में मैं queuable interfaces पढ़ाने वाला हूँ आपको. The next thing is queuable interfaces. ठीक है, तो queuable interfaces के टाइम पे I will be discussing few of the drawbacks of future method. तो मैं वापस यहाँ लाऊंगा आपको, और ये 2-3 पॉइंट जो है वो मैं डिस्कस करूंगा आपके साथ में. ये 3 पॉइंट, पॉइंट नंबर 4, 5 एंड 6. अभी इसका कोई पर्पस नहीं है, इसको अभी डिस्कस नहीं करते अपन. लेकिन जब मैं क्यूएबल मेथड्स पढ़ाऊंगा ना, तो फिर मैं शुरुआत ही यहाँ से करूंगा आपकी. तो अभी फिलहाल आप ये पहले 3 पॉइंट्स पे कंसंट्रेट करो कि टू मेक एनी मेथड एज अ फ्यूचर. फ्यूचर शुड ऑलवेज बी अ मेथड. मैं बार बार बोल रहा हूँ, देखो, फ्यूचर शुड ऑलवेज बी अ मेथड. इट इज नॉट अ क्लास. वी कैनॉट मेक कंप्लीट क्लास एज अ फ्यूचर. ओके, फ्यूचर शुड ऑलवेज बी मेथड, यानी कि क्लास के अंदर की जो मेथड्स होती है ना उसको. हाँ, जिस किसी मेथड को आप फ्यूचर बना रहे हो ना, वो स्टैटिक मेथड होना चाहिए, वो एक प्रोसीजर होना चाहिए. प्रोसीजर डजंट रिटर्न एनीथिंग, मतलब रिटर्न टाइप आपको वॉइड होना चाहिए. इतनी बातों का ख्याल रखो, इतनी बातों का ख्याल रखो. चलो, तो अब हम चलते हैं कि वी आर ट्राइंग टू इंसर्ट अ रिकॉर्ड कॉल्ड एज नीरस्ट त्रिपाठी, एंड इन द सेम ट्रांजेक्शन आई विल एक्चुअली डीएक्टिवेटिंग दिस यूजर. तो मैं पहले एक बार सेल्सफोर्स में जाके चेक कर लेता हूँ कि क्या ये दोनों ऑपरेशन बराबर हैं. डू वी हैव एनीथिंग विद द नेम कॉल्ड एज नीरज, एन, एन से नीरज के नाम से कुछ है, नहीं है. लेट मी गो विद दिस यूजर ऑब्जेक्ट पे जाता हूँ, और वो कस्टमर यूजर जो है उसकी अभी स्टेटस क्या है वो भी देख लेते हैं. कस्टमर यूजर को डीएक्टिवेट करना है, लेकिन फिलहाल कस्टमर यूजर का जो स्टेटस है वो मुझे एक्टिव नजर आ रहा है. नाउ लेट मी एग्जीक्यूट दिस प्रोग्राम. व्हाट आई हैव डन, आई हैव मेड वन ऑफ द मेथड एज टू बी अ फ्यूचर मेथड. दो में से एक मेथड को मैंने फ्यूचर बना ली है. नाउ लेट मी ट्राई टू एग्जीक्यूट दिस प्रोग्राम. फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, डू वी गॉट एनी एरर? नो, एरर हैज बीन bypassed. ठीक है, एरर हैज बीन bypassed. we doesn't got any error. we doesn't got any errors. हमें कोई भी एरर नहीं मिला है. How many SQL queries? One SQL query we have used. How many rows? One record we have been fetched out. How many DML statements out of 150? One DML statement. ठीक है, okay. So let me now go to the Salesforce. This is what the user. ठीक है, let me try to refresh this and see what happens. So customer user is now being deactivated. See, the customer user is now being deactivated. What about the hiring manager? Okay, let me try to refresh this. We have inserted a record called as Neeraj Tripathi. So that's how you were being able to perform the operation on setup as well as non-setup object in a single transaction. So whenever you wanted to do this, as a best practice, we should make two different methods. First method or one method for the setup, the another method for the non-setup. To perform the operations on the setup, we should declare one method, and to perform the operations on non-setup object, we should declare another method. Instead of writing the code inside single method, that is what I have done it in the past. Previously, I have written the code in the single method, but don't do this. As a best practice, whenever you are attempting any operation on both setup and non-setup, you should rather declare two different methods. One method for performing the operation on setup, the another method like this to perform the operation on non-setup. This is the first point. Now, second point, among these two methods, you need to make any one of them as a future method. Future is a method. Future is a method. Future is not a class. Future cannot be applicable at class level because future is always applicable on to method. रट डालो, याद कर लो. ठीक है. Now, if you are making any method as a future method, there are two things needs to be done. पहली बात कि method should be static, method should be void. ठीक है, बस ये दो बातों का ख्याल रखो. तो if it is a static and if it is a void, you could easily make that method as an application. Okay, चलो. Now let me show you something more. So we see all these operations, whatever we done, asynchronous operation. Where we can see them? Apex job. We just now have executed one job We just now executed one job. And so apex, this is what async apex job object. इस object का नाम क्या है? Async apex job. Here you can see the results. ठीक है? What we have executed? What we have executed? We executed future method. We haven't executed batch apex. No, what we executed? Future method. What the status? Completed. Completed. Fully successfully completed. Okay. Total number of batches and everything will be zero over here because this is not a batch programming. What was the name of the class? What was the name of the class where this future method was created? What was the name of the class? The class name is common helper. See the class name, common helper. Then among these two methods, do DML and create HR record. Which was the method? Which was the method whose name was future? Create HR record was the method. Create HR record was the method that was a future method. So, this is the way we can track the synchronous programming. How? There is an object, what the name async apex job, what you are seeing right now over here, whatever you are seeing right now over here, all these are coming from a database table, from an object with the name async apex job. And these are what? These are the fields: action, submitted, job type, status. These are the fields of that object. Understood? So this is what the concept of future method. By tomorrow, I'll be starting with viewable interfaces.